everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Business Process Tech Talk. Today's topic is deep dive using the Business Process Catalog hierarchy in the Microsoft Business Process Catalog. My name is Mandy Tovez, and I will be your moderator today. Just some information up front. We are broadcasting this session through Microsoft Teams. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name and email address may be viewable by session organizers. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be made available in the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page in the upcoming weeks. If you have questions today for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. If you wish your name not to be visible to organizers or session participants, please post your questions anonymously. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session and in a live segment at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. And now I will turn it over to our presenters. Today we have Rachel Proffitt, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft, who will be doing the majority of the presenting. We also have Leonard Van Leuven from Mavim, a value engineer. Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mandy, and thank you for the introduction. Again, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Rachel Proffitt, and I'm a Principal Program Manager here at Microsoft, responsible for our Business Process Excellence program. My contact information is here on the slide, and I do invite you to connect with me. The QR code that you can see on the screen will take you straight to my LinkedIn profile. Leonard, would you like to take a quick moment to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. My name is Leonard Van Leuven. I'm a value engineer at Mavim. And in this tech talk, I will do a short demo of the process catalog in Mavim.
Excellent. In today's session, we're going to be deep diving into the 6 levels of the business process catalog, starting from those end-to-end processes and drilling all the way down to those test cases. For each of the levels, we'll be covering in more detail, what is that level, how do you name it, when to create it or not create it, and our recommendations for making updates and how to create them. And we'll also be providing real-life examples. The goal is not just understanding the hierarchy. It's helping you make better decisions when working with customers and implementations using the business process catalog. To start, I'm just going to briefly anchor where we are before we go deeper. Last week, we talked about the objectives pillar and that hierarchy in the business process catalog. And today, we're going to be focused on the business processes pillar. This is where the hierarchy lives. The business process catalog sits inside a broader model inside of the Mavim portal, and it's also visible inside of your Azure DevOps. At a high level, this pillar is organized into levels from end-to-end processes at the top, down through process areas, business processes, and then into more detailed levels beneath that. What I want you to take away from this slide is at the top, we're describing the business in simple, universal terms. As we move down through the hierarchy, we gradually become more specific and more execution-focused. We'll unpack exactly what each level means and how to use it as we go, but this is the mental model to keep in mind. We're moving from business definition to how that gets delivered in a system. Let's build on that and look at the hierarchy in a little bit more detail. There's a lot of information on this slide, and it's really just a reference slide, so I'm not going to read all of this text to you. The key takeaway is the split. Levels 1 through 3 are describing the business and they're system agnostic. This includes the end-to-end processes, process areas, and business processes. Levels 4 through 6 are product-specific and execution-focused. We'll take a much closer look at each one of these throughout today's presentation. So let's go ahead and get started by starting at the top level with the end-to-end processes. The business process catalog currently includes 15 standard end-to-end processes that represent the full enterprise value chain. I want to specifically call out administer to operate, which is marked here on the slide with the red star. And this is because this process represents the IT functions of an organization, and it includes all of our success by design checklists and tasks. Specifically, the first area of this end-to-end process is called implement solutions. And this is where you'll see the main functions required for all Dynamics 365 deployments. There are many other useful processes in this end-to-end that are common in any IT or technology deployment as well, such as business continuity, support functions, system training and adoption, just as a few examples. You'll also see that we're introducing an additional process into the catalog, which is coming soon, called Rent to Return, which will cover the new rental management processes that will be coming soon to our Dynamics 365 suite. The purpose of this table is not to walk through each one individually, but to orient you to the overall landscape. Each end-to-end process can apply to customer engagement, ERP, or both. So this is not an ERP-only framework. It spans the full Dynamics 365 stack and beyond into Azure and our Microsoft 365 products. You'll also see the primary products associated to each process in this table. This helps you to start connect the business view to the actual solution architecture. And then in our last column of this table, we're showing examples of the level 3 types of business processes. These are the types of business activities that sit underneath each end-to-end process. So if you're wondering where a particular process is at, this is a high level that helps you kind of understand what you'll find in each end-to-end. It's obviously not detailed and doesn't include every single one, but they're the big ticket items that you'll find across the board. And it's a great reference slide to help you get oriented with the business process catalog. This provides you the foundation for how we structure implementations. And as we go deeper in the next slides, we'll break down how these decompose into those more detailed levels. So let's take a look now at how you actually manage these end-to-end processes day to day. And I'm going to show two key views on this slide. So first, we're looking at Azure DevOps. This is where the project management happens. What you're seeing here is a backlog query view showing all 15 end-to-end processes listed out. Azure DevOps is built with a tree-like hierarchy, and the end-to-end processes sit at the top of that tree. This structure is intentional. It gives your teams a clear, navigable framework that mirrors the catalog itself. You can expand any of these end-to-end processes and drill down into the process areas, business processes, and scenarios underneath. One thing that I want to call out here is that the area paths in Azure DevOps are mapped directly to the end-to-end processes down to level 3. That's a huge benefit when it comes to managing the backlog. It means your teams can filter, query, and organize work into those same area paths, which keeps everything aligned with the catalog hierarchy. So when a consultant is working in the backlog, they're navigating the same structure they see in the catalog, and there's no mental manual translation needed. Now, on the lower right-hand side, you can now see the Mavim landing page. Specifically, this is the home view of all the end-to-end processes. Mavim is a visualization tool that gives your end users a much more intuitive way to navigate the catalog. You can see the process areas branching out from end-to-end processes when you drill in. The key thing is that every single element you see in the visuals, every node, and every connection inside Mavim is clickable. And when you click into any of those elements, you drill into the additional details and see all the metadata associated with that process. It makes the catalog feel accessible and interactive rather than just a flat list of items. For business analysts and stakeholders who aren't living in Azure DevOps every day, this is often the preferred way to explore and understand the process landscape. So together, Azure DevOps gives you the project management backbone, and Mavim gives you the visual, user-friendly front door. The end-to-end processes are meant to be a stable foundation for the entire catalog. The 15 end-to-end processes together are meant to cover the full enterprise value chain. Because of that, the guidance is very clear. We generally don't add new ones unless there is a specific need, as the case with the rent to return end-to-end process that is coming soon. If something feels missing, the right path is to submit that through the catalog feedback process rather than creating a new structure locally. And that link is here on the slide. What is flexible is naming. Renaming is okay if it helps align with customer terminology or industry language. The goal is adoption and clarity for the business, so the name should make sense in their context. That said, there's an important trade-off. Once you rename, you're no longer aligned one-to-one with Microsoft's standard documentation and guidance. So that's a conscious decision that teams need to make. There are also a couple practical considerations here. If you rename an end-to-end process, you should rename it consistently in both Azure DevOps and Mavim and any other resources that you're using, and make sure that your area paths and reporting structures are renamed and stay aligned as well. So overall, the mindset at level 1 is use the standard structure, adapt the language if absolutely necessary, and don't reinvent the framework. That consistency at the top is what allows everything underneath to stay organized and comparable across implementations. Now, let's go one level deeper and look at how we manage process areas. This is what we refer to as level 2 in the catalog hierarchy. Here, you're looking at the Azure DevOps backlog query again, but this time I've expanded the concept to market end-to-end process so you can see the process areas nested underneath it. You'll notice it follows the same tree structure we talked about on the previous slides, but now we're drilling into the children. I've also expanded the prepare marketing campaigns business process to show you that you can continue drilling down further into the business process and scenarios below it. This is the power of that hierarchical structure in Azure DevOps. You can navigate it from the highest level all the way down to the individual work items without ever losing context of where you are in the catalog. Now, the Mavim visual that you see on the right is where things, I think, get a little interesting. Along the bottom, you'll see the blue swirling lines. Those represent the 15 end-to-end processes. So you've got your full catalog landscape right in one view. Above that, the purple line and dots represent the process areas. In this case, we've drilled specifically into concept to market. And you can see things like develop marketing strategy, research and develop offerings, manage service offerings, and so on. These are the areas of the concept to market path. But here's the key takeaway I want you to focus on. If you look at the connections, those purple lines don't just stay within concept to market, they reach back and connect to other end-to-end processes across the catalog. And this is critical. No business process in any organization lives in isolation. Think about it. When you're preparing marketing campaigns, there are touch points into order to cash, prospect to quote, and other areas of the business. These interconnectivity points are what make the business run smoothly, and the catalog is designed to help surface those relationships. Mavim makes this visible and intuitive. Every element you see, every node, every connection line, again, is clickable. You can drill into any of these process areas and see the full metadata behind it. For your consultants and business analysts, this is an incredibly powerful way to understand, and not just a single process, but how it fits into the broader organizational landscape. At this level, the guidance is similar to what we just covered for end-to-end processes, so I'm not going to repeat those same points in detail. The important distinction here is how process areas help structure each end-to-end process. A process area represents a major phase or component within the end-to-end flow, often associated with specific personas or roles. And in the standard catalog, there's usually a clear pattern to that structure. Most end-to-end processes begin with a strategy-oriented area and end with an analysis and reporting area, with the core operational work in between. The strategy side is where the organizations define the controls, rules, setups, and decisions that shape how the process will run. These are often low-frequency activities, but they matter, and I might argue they matter the most in a new technology implementation because they determine how the rest of the process is executed. On the other end, the analysis and reporting side is about learning from the process, monitoring outcomes, and feeding that insight back into improvement. It's not meant to be a random collection of reports or a list or a library of reports. The point is that reporting should connect back to decisions and actions within the business process. So the key takeaway for level 2 is not just that it breaks an end-to-end process into major areas, but that it gives each process a repeatable structure: strategy at the beginning, execution in the middle, and analysis at the end. Now, let's move down into level 3, which is where the catalog starts becoming more actionable. This is usually the point where teams begin asking more detailed questions about what belongs in the catalog and what does not. Level 3 is where we define the actual business processes that sit inside each process area. So before we go deeper into the catalog, I want to take a step back and talk about how we define a business process. When thinking about and documenting business processes, a good standard to use as a starting point is a standard process documentation technique called IDEF0. And if you haven't come across it before, it's a structured way to describe any process by breaking it into 4 key elements. You can see them here on the slide. Every process has inputs on the left. That's the data that flows into the process. Controls at the top. These are the rules and constraints that govern how the process runs. Outputs on the right. These are the results that the process produces. And resources at the bottom. These are the people and systems that actually execute the process. This framework is important because it gives a consistent language for describing a process at any level of the catalog. This charting technique is typically used at higher level processes and not at the more detailed system process or test cases. But this framework, I think, is important, again, because it's creating that consistent language. And so I want to walk through a concrete example, creating a case in customer service. First are the controls. These are the guardrails. Think about SLA policies and entitlements. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. I want to start with the inputs. When someone is creating a case, we need a contact or account record to associate it with, a case category and a priority level, a description of the problem, and the channel it came in on. There could be other details as well that are specific to your organization, but fundamentally, these are the basics that are required for any case in any organization. These are the things that must exist before the process can start. Now are the controls. These are the guardrails. Think about your SLA policies and entitlements that determine response time commitments, your case routing rules, which dictate where the case gets assigned, and business unit permissions that control who can see and act on a case. These aren't things the agent decides on in the moment. They're set up ahead of time, and they govern the process automatically. Now, the outputs on the right side, this is when the process completes. What do we have? And in this case, we get a case record created in Dynamics 365. A notification is sent to the assigned agent. An SLA timer starts tracking against commitment, and the case gets added to the appropriate service queue. These are just examples of tangible results that you might have as a part of creating a new case. And finally, we have the resources. In this case, the customer service agent is the person who is handling the case. The Dynamics 365 customer service application is where it's all happening, and the knowledge base articles they reference to resolve the issues. Now, you could have other channels as well, like your phone systems, your email systems, your chat systems, your social media systems, if that's where the case is coming from. And so those could also be resources depending on your particular deployment. This IDEF0 pattern can apply to every process and activity in the business process catalog, whether it's creating a case, processing a purchase order, or running payroll, just as a few examples. When you're documenting or extending the catalog, always think about these 4 elements. So, now that we understand how to define a business process, we'll look at some examples. A good level 3 business process is system agnostic. It uses clear business language and describes a distinct business function. Examples like managing customer credit, processing vendor invoices, or recording financial transactions work well because they describe what the business does, not how a specific system performs it. The examples on the right show the opposite. Once you reference a product, a UI step, or a specific feature, you've usually gone too low in the hierarchy. So the core test for level 3 is simple. If it describes a real business function in business language, it likely belongs here. If it describes a product behavior, a click path, or a feature in the system, it likely belongs lower in the hierarchy. Level 3 is where discipline really matters because this is where you're defining the core business language. All business processes at this level should follow a clear verb-noun structure. And that's why you see a preferred verb list on the slide. Things like analyze, approve, create, manage, track, and report. This isn't just formatting, it ensures consistency across the catalog and makes processes immediately understandable across teams. Every level 3 process should describe a clear business function, not a system behavior. Should be able to read it and understand what the business is trying to accomplish without referencing a product. Another key point on this slide is around overcreation. If you find yourself creating a large number of new level 3 processes, it's usually a signal that you're adding implementation detail too high in the hierarchy. That detail likely belongs in the scenarios or system processes instead. And finally, you'll see industry translations called out. Different industries naturally use different language, and today that often results in renaming. Over the time, the goal for us is to move toward more consistent industry-aligned translations, and we're planning to add new features to help support this so that you're not constantly renaming or fragmenting the catalog. Now, let's take a look at this in the system. On the left, you can see the work item is open in Azure DevOps. In this example, we have the revalue inventory process is the one that I chose and opened up. This is part of the record to report. And this is where you can see all the information about the business process, the title, the description, the acceptance criteria, the state, the area path, and much more. This is the same view consultants and implementation teams will use day to day when they're working in that backlog. Everything they need to understand the scope of this business process is right there. Now, on the right, I've switched to the references tab for the same work item in Azure DevOps. This is an important tab that sometimes gets overlooked. The References tab shows you the additional context linked to this work items. Things like links to documentation, any other artifacts that have been associated, the status, the application information, APQC references, and much more. This is where you start to see the connections between the processes. You can also use the standard links tab in Azure DevOps to view and add relationships to other work items. Just like we talked about earlier with the interconnectivity in Mavim, Azure DevOps uses these references to maintain traceability. If you're working on and revaluing inventory and need to understand what feeds into it or what depends on it, the links tab is where you look. The key takeaway here is that Azure DevOps gives you some of the detailed work item level view of every business process in the catalog, and the references you keep connected to the broader context. Now, let's switch gears and have a look at this inside of Mavim. It's the same revalue inventory process, but this time through the lens of the Mavim Improve portal. And you'll immediately see the difference in how these tools complement each other. Here you can see the BPMN 2.0 flowchart for this process. This is a key differentiator for Mavim. Instead of just reading a description of the process, you can actually visualize the process flow with a standard BPMN diagram. We provide default flow diagrams for all 600 plus business processes in the catalog, and you can see the activities, decision points, and the sequence of steps. It's the actual process modeled visually. And here's the practical part. You see that pencil icon on the flow in the upper right-hand corner? That's the edit button. If your team needs to customize or extend this process for your specific customer scenario, you can click that icon and modify the flow directly in Mavim. You're not just reading documentation, you're working with a living, editable process model. Now, in our second screenshot, you're looking at the Fields tab for the same work item. You simply just scroll down and you can expand or collapse the various sections. This is where all that metadata lives, the detailed properties, attributes, and configuration data associated with this process. You can see the structured information that describes the process beyond just the flowchart. And just like with the diagram, Mavim makes this editable. If you need to update the topic or modify any of the metadata, you use the Edit icon on the Fields tab to make your changes directly. So the combination is powerful. Azure DevOps gives you the project management backbone with the work items and backlog tracking, and Mavim gives you the visual process models and rich metadata. Your implementation teams should be comfortable with working in both. Depending on what they need, if you're managing tasks and tracking progress, you're in Azure DevOps. If you're understanding, visualizing, or editing the actual business process or work instructions, you're in Mavim. Now, I wanted to quickly get a little bit more hands-on and walk you through the actual steps for creating a new business process in Mavim. And there are a few structural nuances I want to make sure you understand before we dive in. Step one is you're going to start by selecting the area where you want to add your business process. This is the process area level in the tree. So if you're working on something under order to cash, you'd navigate to that area first. Now, the second step is where the first nuance comes in. You're going to create a child topic under that area, but it's going to be of the type group topic, not a process. And in the new Mavim types, it's going to be a folder. This is an extra folder level that acts as a container. We recommend that you name this folder or group topic the same name as the actual business process you're about to create. So if your business process is called Create a Purchase Order, your folder or group topic would also be called Create a Purchase Order. Think of it as a folder that holds everything related to the business process, the process itself, the scenarios, and more. To do this, you hover over the row in the tree, and you'll see a three-dot icon, the ellipsis, appear on that row. Click it, and it opens a dialog where you can select Add Child Topic. From there, you choose the topic type. In this case, if you're using the legacy topic types, you choose Group. If you're using the new topic types that were just released, you would choose Folder. Now, inside that group topic you just created, you'll create another child topic. This time, it's of the type process. This is your actual business process definition. Use the same three-dot icon workflow. Hover, click the ellipsis, and select Add Child Topic, and choose Process as the type. Now, step 4, this is the second structural nuance. Back on that group topic or that first folder topic in step 2, we're going to create another folder topic, or meaning topic if you're using the legacy topic types, called scenarios. This creates another folder level topic where you'll later add your individual level scenarios. And so now your parent topic for the business process, like in the example shown, revalue inventory, has the process itself, which is also called revalue inventory, and the scenarios folder. Next, you're ready to go back to the process that you created in step 3 and create a chart on it. This is where your BPMN 2.0 flow diagram will live. The visual representation of your business process flow is important, and you do this by clicking on the chart icon that appears on the row when you hover over it. And finally, still on that process topic that you created in step 3, you're going to define your field definitions. This is where all that metadata and the structured properties for the process get configured. So to recap, you've got a group topic or folder as a container with a process and a scenarios folder as its children. The process holds your chart and field definitions. The scenarios folder is where you'll build out your L4 variations over time. That 3-dot icon on the tree row is your go-to for adding child topics at each step. Now, we're going to move down to the next level, and this is where the catalog shifts from business definition into application. And this is also where the most implementation decisions start to show up. We'll break down how that works in our next slide. At this level, the catalog shifts from describing the business in general terms to how that business process shows up in a specific solution. A single business process can take different forms depending on the product, the industry, the organization unit, such as a department, business unit, or legal entity, for example, or the deployment approach. This is really specific to project operations, where we have 3 different deployment modes, but you'll also see this show up where there's a desktop version of a process and a mobile version of a process, for example. And that's where the scenarios start to come in. This is where implementation work becomes much more concrete because you're no longer talking about the process in theory, you're aligning it to how it actually runs in a specific system. This is also where teams will spend the majority of their time during real projects, because this is where you adapt the standard catalog to fit the solution you're delivering. And here's how that plays out in practice. As mentioned on the previous slide, the business intent doesn't change. The variation comes from how it's executed. That's why you can take a single 3 process and see multiple valid level 4 scenarios depending on the product or context. The key signal that something is a scenario is that it clearly reflects a specific product or implementation path. You'll also see where things can go wrong. If there's no product context, it's likely still a level 3. If it becomes too broad, it spans multiple scenarios. And if it gets too detailed, it drops down into a system process. So this level is really about getting the scope right, clear, distinct, and tied to how the solution actually works. So we've pulled together some recommendations. And again, level 4 is the most common starting extension point in the catalog. This is where we expect you to spend most of your time adapting the catalog structure to your business to fit a specific customer, industry, or product variation. When the same business process is executed differently in a specific product or industry, that's when a new scenario is introduced. That's the key signal that you're at the right level. Naming becomes important here. Each scenario should clearly reflect the product being used And optionally, the deployment model, industry, organization unit, or partner solution, from the marketplace as an example. So it's immediately clear how that version of the process is being executed. The industry-specific variations belong at this level. As mentioned earlier, level 3 should stay as universal as possible. Level 4 is where industry context is expressed. For partner solutions or marketplace solutions, only reference those that are actually like real and installed and implemented in your environment, like those available in AppSource or the Azure Marketplace. This helps keep the catalog consistent and usable across teams. But if you have a homegrown system as well, it's okay to reference those other homegrown systems or other third-party solutions that you've purchased and deployed within your organization. As has been mentioned at other levels, if you identify something that should exist as a part of the standard catalog, there's a path to submit that feedback rather than maintaining it on your own. So we do highly recommend that if you find something that should be in the standard catalog, please report that to us at aka.ms/business process catalog feedback. The goal at this level is clarity, taking the standard catalog and mapping it cleanly to how a solution is actually delivered for your business. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Leonard, who's going to do a quick demonstration for us and show us how to create new scenarios in Mavim. Leonard, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. So we start in Mavim at the same process we saw earlier, the revalue inventory. And then from here, we open up the tree structure and see the process, but also in there, the scenarios folder with all the existing level 4 scenarios. This is where we're going to add a new child topic. We're going to give it a name, your new scenario. And then for the type, we select scenario PPC. This is the new set of topic types that will come to everyone in Mavim. Well, then we have the new scenario. We can select it. And then, well, we get the empty scenario. The fields are there by default, and you can now start filling in the fields. The Microsoft ID normally is reserved for Microsoft. They will put in their unique ID. Partners, if they create processes, they can fill in a unique partner ID, like the Mavim ID. And for the process sequence ID, that basically follows the structure of the existing scenarios. So in this case, I'll save the scenario first and look up what the latest process sequence ID is. So I'm copying that one, go back to the new scenario, and then put it in here. Again, if you add new scenarios, you can also create your own sequence number in here, but I advise to follow the structure that is already created. Then we can fill in some more details, like the catalog status. 50 custom means that you create some extra content that is not coming from Microsoft, and therefore the author is also, in this case, set to project and not to the Microsoft. Again, it depends who is adding this. Well, then we can fill in some more info on the application family and the product that's relevant for this scenario. In this case, we choose finance within F&O. And then, well, of course, you can fill in all the fields, but for now, we're going to stick to the most important ones. Set the priority, in this case, to level 2. You can, of course, put in a description for this scenario. You can start typing in. The box can be enlarged if you have more text in here. And the scoping, well, it's a new scenario, so by default we set that directly to in scope because it's part of our project. Yeah, that basically ends this demo. That's how you add a new scenario in Mavim.
Excellent. So now we're going to switch gears and I'm going to show how to do this in Azure DevOps. So I'm going to actually start this over because it went really fast. Apologies about that. Oops. Okay. So in Azure DevOps, we are going to, I think I've advanced a little bit too far. There we go. You'll use the ellipsis button and say link to a new work item. When you create it, the link type is child and the work item type is scenario, and then you'll type in the title. Then you'll click add link. It'll open up the detail page, and this is where you can start to fill in that additional information. Again, like Leonard described, you'll need to populate that process sequence ID, looking it up from like the previous one, and then typing in those details, making sure that they're unique. That process sequence ID is really just to help you sort those processes so that they show up in a logical sequence. So we always recommend to like use a number that puts it in the best sequence in the flow. Then you'll need to click over to that references tab where we have those additional details and that Microsoft ID. In my environment, it is a mandatory field. In your environment, it won't be. But that's where you would put in a 0 or say not applicable. And obviously, there's lots of other columns. All the same columns that exist in Mavim exist in the Azure DevOps, and you can fill those details out by scrolling down and filling out those fields. We just separate them in Azure DevOps into multiple tabs, and that user interface looks a little bit different. So now we're ready to move from scenarios one step lower into system processes. And this is where we shift from describing a product-specific variation of a business process to describing the individual actions that are going to be performed in the system. So at level 5, the focus, again, is shifting from what actually shifts to like what is actually going to happen inside the system. Each system process represents a single step a user or system performs to complete part of a scenario. And I want to be clear, it's not a single click, it's a single like step. So when you think about like drawing like a flow diagram, it's like create an order, add lines to the order, confirm the order, right? Those would be the examples. And we have more examples a little bit later on. A key point on this slide, though, is traceability. Every system process should map directly to something concrete in the system, a form, a page, a data entity, or a specific action. If you're making one system process for every button or every field, you've probably you have gone too far. The naming reflects that as well. It stays action-oriented, what the user is doing in the system, not the broader business intent. You'll also see that coverage today is stronger in source to pay, and we are planning to expand our system processes and test cases across the entire business process catalog in future releases. One important rule to anchor on, if an action can be repeated on the same entity with different data, then that should stand on its own as a system process. And using the example like a sales order, we create the header of the sales order and we create lines of the sales order. Those are two different system processes because I can add multiple lines and repeat that more than one time. So bringing this down into some real life examples. Well-formed system processes are very precise. Each one represents a single distinct action tied to the system. Creating a record and updating a record are separate, even if they act on the same entity. Where sometimes this tends to go off track is with scope. If something is too broad, it's combining multiple actions, it belongs higher. If it combines steps like setting up something and approving it, which are done by two different people, it likely needs to be split. And if it drops into individual clicks, then it's gone too low. So the balance here is intentional, specific enough to map to the system, but still meaningful as an action. That precision is what allows these to be validated cleanly when we get down to the next level of the test cases. So now I want to move into the final level of the hierarchy, which are those test cases. Up to this point, we've moved from defining the business to how it runs in a product to what actually happens in the system. Level 6 is where that work gets validated. This is where the catalog shifts from structure and definition into verification, making sure that we designed and built actually works as expected. It's what turns the hierarchy into something executable in real delivery. At level 6, every test case that we provide today is currently a unit test. It's validating one specific action or outcome. Most test cases map directly to CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, to a specific system behavior like a custom button or validation. You'll also see the distinction between positive and negative testing. Positive tests confirm the system works when everything correct. Negative tests confirm that the system behaves correctly when something is wrong, and that's just as important. A strong test case is structured and consistent. It includes clear prerequisites, step-by-step actions, and a defined expected result. One important note is that test case coverage today is more mature, and we talked about this earlier, like source to pay. We do have some sprinkled throughout others, but we will continue to expand that across the rest of the catalog. The key takeaway here is that test cases are tightly aligned to system behavior, and they validate exactly what was defined at level 5. So here I want to dive into the difference between positive and negative test cases in a more concrete way. Positive tests are straightforward. They confirm that things work when conditions are correct. Create a vendor, delete a vendor with no transactions, update bank details. Expected outcome is success, that we were able to create a vendor or delete a vendor or update the bank details. Negative tests do the opposite. They validate that the system prevents incorrect actions. For example, trying to delete a vendor that has transactions. The correct behavior is to block it, or creating a vendor without required fields. The system should return a validation error. The important pattern is called out here using a prefix like negative, which makes them easy to identify and track. Strong implementations don't just test that things work. They test that the controls and rules are enforced. And if we documented those controls back on level 3, it should be easier to create these test cases at the lower level. So here we've got some test case examples. Strong test cases are specific and focused. A good test case validates one action under clear conditions with a defined outcome. Create a vendor, delete a vendor with no transactions. A negative case with missing fields. Each is easy to execute, maintain, and trace. Weak test cases usually fall into one of a few test patterns. They're too broad, they're combining multiple actions, or not actually validating anything. Navigation steps without assertions or test everything type scenarios don't provide useful validation. The rule stays simple: one test case per action, one expected result. Level 6 is where that testing becomes part of how you manage and extend your solution, not just validating it at the end. As you introduce changes to the solution, your testing should scale with it. New scenarios that you add at level 5 should come with new test cases, and system changes require updates to test coverage. There's a direct line from what you build and extend in your solution to what you should be validating. The most important principle here is focus. Each test case should validate one action. That keeps testing clear, maintainable, and easy to trace back to system behavior. Negative testing, again, is just as important as that positive testing. It shows you how to confirm the system reinforces the rules, not just completes actions successfully. You'll also see that as you introduce more complexity, additional buttons, fields, or logic, you don't expand a single test case. You add more or new test cases. Each behavior gets its own validation path. Existing test cases can be extended as solutions evolve, but the structure should stay consistent. And if something you're testing reflects a broader gap in the standard catalog, there again is a path to submit that back through the feedback process. The key takeaway here is that level 6 keeps everything grounded. It ensures that what's defined, designed, and built actually works consistently and predictably in a real solution. So now we're going to switch over and do a quick demonstration of how to create a test case in Azure DevOps, as the structure of a test case in Azure DevOps is a little different than the other work item types. So I'm here in Azure DevOps and we're on the create a sales order, and I'm going to link to a new work item. In this case, the link type will be child and the work item type will be test case. We'll give the test case a new title. So that's the name of your test case, whatever you're testing, and a new screen will open. Test cases have a steps tab, and this is where you'll put in the details of the steps. So you can see I'm putting step 1 and step 2, and then we can switch to the summary. And that description field is where you can type in the details of your test case. Next, I'm going to switch over to the References tab, and here I can put in all of those additional references, and if you scroll over to the right, you'll have those additional details again. You can put in process sequence IDs, Microsoft partner IDs, your catalog status, and so on, just like we did on other rows. So you can now say who created this. And when you're finished, you'll simply click Save and Close. So now that we've drilled through all of the different types of work items, we're going to go ahead and switch gears and talk a little bit about resources and recommendations. You heard us mention a few times in today's presentation about the legacy topic types in Mavim and the new topic types in Mavim. So this slide we put together as a reference mapping for you that kind of shows what the Azure DevOps work item types are, what the legacy topic types in Mavim are, and what the new ones are. You'll notice that the new Mavim topic types match exactly to the Azure DevOps topic types. So that should make it easier moving forward. If you're on using Mavim today with the legacy topic types, we'll be coming out with some more guidance soon on how to transition to the new topic types. If you've trained your users on the old topic types, this is that mapping what those old topic types are to the new topic types. And you can see a screenshot on the right-hand side as well that shows kind of what that structure looks like inside of Mavim. So the Microsoft Business Process Catalog resources, these are just links that you can use to learn more information about the Business Process Catalog. We've got lots of Learn articles, other tech talks, some of those feedback links and so on are also available here. And if you've got questions or feedback, we do encourage you can reach out to the Biz Process Guides at Microsoft.com, which emails the entire team here at Microsoft working on the Business Process Catalog. We've also pulled together a variety of resources for you to learn more about Mavim. If you are interested in learning more about Mavim, you can use the QR code that you see here on the slide to learn a little bit more and get started with your free trial. And there's lots of additional links and resources and videos available on how to use Mavim with your implementations. As a reminder, this Tech Talk is part of a large series of Tech Talks that we've been doing. Up next week will be the deliverables tree. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that deliverables tree. and talk more about how to use that. Make sure to get your calendars marked. There are 2 options for our Tech Talks. We have been having low attendance on our option 2 Tech Talks. We may be canceling option 2 in the future if we don't get increased attendance, and just stick to option 1. And as always, your feedback is very important to us, so we invite you to please take a few moments to fill out the survey about today's presentation. And if you do have questions, we're going to open it up, and we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A panel, so we'll go ahead and work through those questions now. The first question that I see is, how can Microsoft partners get access to Mavim? Is it locked behind a paywall? Does Mavim also support the RFP process during the strategize phase, adding effort, implementation cost per item, or what is the recommended tool to be used for that purpose? So a couple good questions, great questions. We are planning to integrate Mavim with our implementation portal. That is actually coming very soon, and we'll be doing more Tech Talks with that. The integration with our implementation portal will provide free access to the visualizations and some of the features of Mavim in our implementation portal at no cost to customers and partners. If you want to use the full functionality of Mavim and the demonstrations that we have been showing, editing, adding new processes, etc., in your product or projects, you will need to purchase Mavim, and that is available in the Azure Marketplace. I'll actually just quickly go back to that slide in case you weren't able to scan the QR code or get that link. Also, Leonard or Sienna, if you can put the actual link directly in the chat for people to click on, that would be great as well. The second part of the question, does Mavim also support the RFP process during the strategize phase? And what is the recommended tool to be used for that purpose? Obviously, there are many different tools and ways that you can handle an RFP. I do think that Mavim can be used for that. We do encourage partners and implementation consultants to leverage the business process catalog. There are fields that are provided for t-shirt sizing, scoping, and estimation. Most of those fields are just like template fields that we have provided that you as a partner can fill out. And that's one of the things that we recommend partners do. We obviously have all of the scoping and fit gap fields as well. There's also a section in the business process catalog that we'll talk more about in our deliverables tree for requirements. And so in our Tech Talk next week, we'll talk more about requirements and how to handle that, and kind of how requirements link into those business processes. So hopefully that answers the question. If not, feel free to put another one in and we'll circle back. The next question was, could you please let us know where the recordings of the individual Tech Talks are available? I wasn't able to find them. I do think that we maybe answered this in the chat, but I'll verbally answer it. They aren't available yet. Our team is working on the editing process of the actual Tech Talks. Sometimes we get a backlog and it can take a few weeks for them to get up there, but they will be on the Dynamics community site when they're ready. And Mandy has posted a link to that blog where you can find them in the community site. Somebody asked a question, is there a sequence expected to be added to configuration or migration work items to aid the setup, configuration, and build packages? Great question. We are not planning to add the process sequence ID into the deliverables tree. And the reason for that is it's a lot more complicated than a straight sequence. We are working to add more relationships, and part of some of the solutions that we've been working on is this concept of a dependency agent. And the idea behind this dependency agent is it will help define those dependencies based off of the scope of your business processes. And we're working towards agents that help automate the configuration. Obviously, like if you wanted to put them in a sequence, you can certainly do that. I actually do think that there is a sequence column that is blank right now. But I think like it's more complex than just numbering things 1 through 100, and so we're trying to figure out the best way to address that in the data model. And the real answer to it is really comes down to this concept of dependencies. So we are working towards that. Still more work to be done, and definitely something to keep an eye out for more updates in the future. But great question and great feedback. The next question says, within Azure DevOps, having reviewed the work item configuration, is there any consideration to the stages and the journey of the states, or is this perceived to be either picked up by a combination of fields, or is the state to be determined by the organization applying the ADO implementation? Does Mavim use ADO state in their integration? Two very great questions. So obviously, states are required in Azure DevOps, and our Azure DevOps template doesn't actually create any custom states. It's actually part of what we recommend that partners do as a part of their implementation methodology. Our Success by Design framework gives some high-level recommendations on it, but from a Microsoft perspective, we are not trying to dictate to partners and customers the implementation methodology, rather provide a framework that allows you to kind of implement in the way that works best for your organization. So we don't provide states out of the box. We do provide the framework for you to extend those states in our Azure DevOps template. Mavim does include the field for states inside of Mavim, and that state can be synchronized in the Azure DevOps integration. We'll be talking more about this in our Success by Design delivery plan session and in our Azure DevOps integration session as well. So we'll dive into that in more detail. So definitely stay tuned for some of the more upcoming Tech Talks, but hopefully that gives you a high-level answer and can point you in the right direction. So the next question is, if for whatever reason Mavim is not chosen to be used, where can we get a hold of the Visio process flows, which are utilized in Mavim? Great question. As of today, all of the flow diagrams are available, and I'll go back to the slide here. There's a QR link here on the slide. It is at aka.ms/business process flow. They are downloadable as a Visio flow diagram today. We are planning to deprecate those flows once our integration with the implementation portal is completed. Once that implementation portal is fully integrated and the free availability of those flow diagrams is available in the implementation portal, we'll no longer allow them to be downloaded from the GitHub repo. Instead, we will be asking all partners and customers to navigate to our business process catalog to see and use those flows. Side note, the flow diagrams in our implementation portal will not be editable, and they will not be downloadable resources. They will be visualizations that you can use and leverage, but you could obviously recreate them for your projects, but we are not planning at this time to make them be a downloadable, editable resource in the implementation portal. So great questions. The next question is, please can you share the business process catalog feedback link in this channel? So it looks like maybe you're struggling and have some feedback. Always happy to connect. Mandy did paste that in the chat. You can see it here on the slide as well. It's aka.ms/business process catalog feedback. And thank you for reporting any errors that you have. If you do have more feedback or you'd like to schedule a call with us to discuss your feedback in more detail, we're always open to that. Feel free to shoot me an email, or you can send it over to the Biz Process Guides as well. The next question that we have is, following the end-to-end overview, there's a lot of great input on actions to around managing projects. Where in the catalog is the action scenarios around starting, managing the creation of a new project created? And that's a great question. I think if I understand this correctly, you're asking like, where do you find the process of starting a new project? And that would be and I don't know if you're talking about like a technology project, like implementing a solution. That would be inside of administer to operate underneath the area of implement solutions. So like if you're deploying new Dynamics 365, we recommend administer to operate should always be in scope for every project. But if you're talking about projects, like actual projects, with project operations, for example, you would find most of the project-related processes underneath project to profit is the end-to-end process. So hopefully that answers the question, but if not, feel free to like put a new question in or reply back and we'll work to get that. Somebody's asking to share a copy of the slide pack. We do make a PDF version of the slides available with the recordings in our TechTalk community dynamics page. So once the Tech Talks are available, that blog gets posted and the PDF of the slides will be available there. And we got a couple of questions about that. I think, we might have some new ones at the very top. New posts. So someone is asking if there's a table explaining the difference between Mavim demo and a paid instance of Mavim. Naturally, you need to understand the ROI on the product. So if it's too limited or not able to connect the demo instance to ADO, this will be more of a challenge acquire. I don't know that we have a table like that created today. Maybe I might kick that over to Leonard or Sienna. I don't know if you guys have some sort of resource that describes the difference between what's available in the free trial.
I can maybe really easily put, you can see that the demo version is a read-only version, is a static version that you can have a look at. And in the paid instance of Mavim, of course, that's the full experience where you can set up your own environments, create copies for each project, and start adding content and edit VCOs and create VCOs, of course. So I think that's the basic difference between the demo free version and the paid version.
Yeah, and I think like when we're a little bit further along and we've got our integration into our implementation portal, which we're hoping is going to be in the next 1 to 2 months, we'll be doing another Tech Talk that dives into that implementation portal integration, and you'll hopefully that'll shed some more light on like what you'll be able to do in our implementation portal with the free version versus what requires you to purchase a full license of Mavim. I know we are over, but we had a lot of questions today. So like great engagement, great questions. So thank you everyone again for joining us today. And this will conclude today's live event. That recording will be made available in the Tech Talks community dynamics page in the upcoming weeks. And as soon as they start, like I suspect they'll probably come in all at once, but once they start showing up, we'll make sure to share those links on social media and in the upcoming Tech Talks as soon as they are available. I know we're getting a lot of asks for them. So thank you again, everyone.
Yes, thanks everyone.